Most people raise cats or dogs. But what if your kitten had razor-sharp claws and wild instincts? In a sleepy town tucked against the forests of North Carolina, a young woman stumbled upon an orphaned bobcat and made a choice that would change her life and the internet forever. Hidden from neighbors, raised in silence, their story began with whispers and ended with a viral video no one could believe. What happened when the wild collided with the human heart? Stay with us, because what you're about to see is raw, real, and unforgettable. A Cry in the Pines. It's not always a scream that shatters silence. Sometimes, it's a cry no bigger than a whisper. The early October air was crisp in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, where the forest burned gold and amber with the season's turn. Sunlight dripped through the canopy, painting warm patches on the moss-covered ground. At the edge of a quiet hiking trail near a forgotten logging road, a young woman stood still, head tilted. Cassie Monroe, 24, small-framed with long auburn hair tucked beneath a wool beanie, narrowed her green eyes. Her boots crunched leaves as she stepped forward, drawn by a strange sound that didn't belong. Thin, sharp, almost like a baby's cry, but not quite. She crouched, scanning the underbrush near a fallen tree. That's when she saw it. Half buried in leaves and curled into a tight ball was a kitten, no bigger than a grapefruit. But this was no house cat. Its fur was marked with distinct black rosettes over tawny gold. Its ears were tufted and pointed, standing like small antennae alert to the world. Blood smeared the tiny paws. Beside it, partially covered in debris, was a larger body, its mother, lifeless and still warm. Cassie's breath caught. A bobcat. The kitten mewed again, weaker now, trembling from cold and shock. Every rational part of her training screamed for her to back away. She'd studied veterinary sciences, done 2 internships, and knew exactly what the law said about handling wildlife, especially predators. But something in her heart overruled her head. Cassie pulled off her flannel jacket, wrapping the fragile creature in its soft lining. The kitten hissed, weakly, then slumped against her chest, eyes fluttering closed. "I'm not supposed to do this," she whispered, pressing her lips into a tight line. "But you're not supposed to die alone either." Her pickup truck was parked a mile back, at the trailhead beside her grandmother's old cabin. She moved quickly, heart hammering in her chest. Not just from fear of being seen, but from the realization that once she took this step, there was no turning back. She placed the bobcat kitten on the passenger seat, cranked the heat, and grabbed a fleece from the back. The tiny creature shivered violently, then curled into a ball against the warmth. Cassie knew how dangerous this was, not just legally, but emotionally. Wild animals weren't pets. They couldn't be domesticated. But she also knew that by morning, the kitten would have frozen to death if she'd left it there. She drove home in silence, the weight of what she'd done sinking in with each mile. When she stepped into the small cabin, she locked the door behind her and laid the kitten on a towel-lined box near the fire. Its chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. "Okay, little one," she said softly. "Looks like we're in this together now." She looked down at its tiny face, eyes just beginning to open again. "I'm calling you Aspen." And with that, a secret life began, the decision that changed everything. Some choices whisper at first, until their consequences scream. Cassie stood in her grandmother's cabin, staring down at the wild bundle nestled in the crate. The fire crackled softly beside her, casting a gentle glow over the room. Outside, the trees swayed in the wind, branches creaking like the breath of something ancient. Inside, a secret had just been born. Aspen, the bobcat kitten, lay wrapped in an old towel, barely moving. His short, spotted fur was damp from the rain, but now warm under the flickering light. His little chest lifted with each fragile breath. Cassie reached into the crate slowly, gently touching his side with 2 fingers. He didn't flinch this time. That scared her more than if he had. She had no plan, no one to ask. She knew the law in North Carolina. Bobcats were classified as wild animals, off limits for unlicensed private care. No matter how noble her intentions were, she was breaking rules that could cost her more than a fine. It could destroy her future in veterinary medicine. But as she looked down at Aspen, something inside her shifted. He wasn't just a wild animal anymore. He was hers, if only for now. The next morning began early, before dawn. Cassie raided her textbooks and old class notes. She sifted through veterinary journals, forums, even fringe wildlife rehabilitation sites. Her phone stayed off. She couldn't risk someone tracing her activity or asking too many questions. She measured Aspen with a fabric tape, roughly 8 inches long, weighing just under 2 pounds, likely no more than 3 or 4 weeks old. His eyes were still blue, cloudy, and unfocused, but alert now. When she reached into the crate again with a bottle of kitten formula, cow's milk substitute mixed with warmed water, and a pinch of raw egg yolk, he hissed weakly, then latched on. The sound of him suckling echoed louder than the storm outside. As days passed, the bond deepened. She spent nights sleeping on the couch next to his crate, just in case he cried. He did often. Sometimes it was hunger. Sometimes, Cassie swore, it was loneliness. By the end of the first week, Aspen had taken to curling on her chest after feedings, his soft fur rising and falling with her breath. His tiny claws would knead into her hoodie, sometimes too sharp, but she never flinched. She built him a small space in the garage, insulated, hidden, and escape-proof. Every morning she carried him wrapped in a blanket, making sure no neighbor saw. She had stopped going to the local feed store, ordering supplies online instead. When her grandmother called, Cassie kept the conversation short. There were scratches on her arms, marks from instinctive swipes and bites. But when he looked up at her with those widening wild eyes, she felt something no one else could see. This wasn't a pet, this was a promise. And Cassie had every intention of keeping it, even if it meant lying to everyone she knew. The secret life begins. You can lock the door, but you can't hide the truth from your own heart. By the 3rd week, Aspen was no longer just a fragile kitten. He was changing, fast. Cassie had known wild animals develop differently than domestic ones, but living through it was something else entirely. Aspen wasn't just growing. He was transforming right in front of her eyes. His legs had thickened, his paws now padded with powerful tufts, and his bright blue eyes had darkened to a piercing amber. Every morning she'd wake to find he'd outgrown something. His crate, his bottle, her assumptions. His fur, once short and soft, was now plush and dappled with rich russet and cream spots. A black ruff had begun to form along the sides of his face, giving him a more feral appearance. His stubby tail twitched constantly, a signal Cassie learned to read. Still meant calm, flicking meant play, thrashing meant danger. And he played rough. One morning, while she was changing out his bedding in the garage enclosure, he pounced from behind a blanket. Teeth grazed her wrist, and his claws snagged her sleeve. She yelped, more from shock than pain. "You're not a house cat, huh?" she whispered, rubbing the sting from her forearm. Aspen just stared back with tilted ears, as if daring her to say it again. Cassie reinforced the walls of the enclosure that same night, using plywood behind the insulation and adding a second latch to the door. She left his space filled with climbing structures, wooden boxes, rope toys, logs she dragged in from the woods. He needed stimulation, and more importantly, distance. Still, the bond between them refused to weaken. Every evening, after studying or clearing her emails for school, she'd return to the garage with a bowl of raw chicken mixed with supplements. Aspen would greet her with a low, curious chirp. Bobcats don't meow, she'd learned. They communicate in small growls, grunts, and trills. His favorite sound was a rhythmic purr-like rumble he made when she sat nearby. He'd pace, circle, then eventually press his side against the fence, waiting for her to rest her hand on his flank. And every time she did, she felt her resolve fracture just a little more. He trusted her. That was dangerous. It didn't help that her nights were now haunted by anxiety. What if someone heard his growl? What if he escaped? She'd covered the windows of the garage and even built a false back in the storage shed in case she needed to move him quickly. The hardest part was lying. Her grandmother asked if she was still volunteering at the Wildlife Rehab Center. Cassie said yes. Her classmates texted about midterms and study groups. She claimed spotty reception. But Aspen was more than a distraction. He had become her obsession, her mission, and, in a strange way, her partner. She started documenting everything: growth rates, eating habits, temperament changes. She filmed him playing with a stuffed deer plushie, climbing his first post, and one afternoon, curling up with his chin resting on her boot. These weren't meant for the public. They were private memories, locked away on a hard drive and hidden behind password-protected folders. Until that night, one video, just one, she uploaded anonymously to a private wildlife rehab forum. No tags, no names. Aspen, resting on a pillow beside a flickering fire, his head on her lap, eyes blinking slowly in rhythm with the flame. She titled it simply, "Sometimes Wild Things Choose You." She didn't know it then, but that was the spark, and the firestorm was coming. Struggles of the heart and claw. Loving something wild means accepting the day it might turn on you, or leave you behind. By the time Aspen was 5 months old, there was no mistaking what he was: a predator. He had grown to over 20 pounds, his body sleek and muscular, his movements increasingly silent and calculated. Every step he took was measured, every glance deliberate. When he padded across the hardwood floor of the cabin, it was like watching a ghost drift through a world built for something else entirely. Cassie, though, still tried to pretend it was working. Her days had fallen into a careful rhythm: dawn feedings, afternoon enrichment in the garage, nightly quiet time beside the fire. Aspen remained attached to her in his own way, rubbing his head against her leg when he was content, chirping when he saw her after a few hours apart. But his instincts had begun to surface in ways she couldn't ignore. The signs were subtle at first. He began stalking birds through the cabin windows, watching them with a predator's patience. One night, he shredded an entire couch cushion in seconds after spotting a moth fluttering near the lamp. Then there were the kills. Cassie woke one morning to find a dead squirrel on the porch. Another day, it was a rabbit, perfectly intact, placed delicately at the doorstep like an offering. Somehow, Aspen had learned to slip out through a gap beneath the garage door, only to return hours later with silent trophies clenched between his jaws. She blocked the gap, reinforced the enclosure. But the truth was settling in, heavy and unrelenting. He wasn't a houseguest anymore. He was a bobcat, and he was becoming harder to hide. Cassie had already cut herself off from nearly everyone in town. She ignored calls from her professors, turned down holiday visits with her family. She even dodged her grandmother's increasingly worried voicemails. "You sound tired," the older woman had said on a crackly message one night. "Are you okay, sweetheart? You sure you're not hiding something?" Cassie had stared at her phone long after the message ended. "Yes," she wanted to scream. "I'm hiding something with claws and teeth and a heartbeat that matches mine." But she couldn't say it. Not yet. One rainy afternoon, she sat on the cabin floor with Aspen curled at her feet. His body had grown long and lean, his breathing slow and steady. She ran her fingers through his thick, ruffled fur. He didn't purr. Bobcats don't purr. But he blinked slowly and nuzzled her wrist. It was the kind of moment that looked peaceful from the outside. But inside, Cassie's chest felt tight with worry. What would happen when he got bigger? What if one day he lashed out, not to hurt her, but because he couldn't help it? She'd read every article she could find. Most bobcats raised in captivity eventually turned aggressive or destructive. Some were euthanized. Others sent to sanctuaries if they were lucky. Cassie didn't know what was worse, being forced to give him up, or keeping him and risking everything. And still, despite the risks, she kept filming. Not for fame, not for proof, just to hold on to something she knew wouldn't last. One clip showed Aspen batting gently at her ponytail as she laughed. Another showed him leaping with impossible grace from one beam to another in the garage rafters. And one, just one, showed him resting his head against her chest as she whispered, "You're my whole damn heart, aren't you?" She didn't mean to upload that one. It was a mistake, a slip, a drag and drop to a shared folder meant for her backup drive. But that night, the file synced to the wrong cloud account. And 24 hours later, the internet knew. A wild bobcat, being raised in someone's living room, curling up like a house cat, licking her hand, looking at her like she was his world. The video exploded. Shares, comments, outrage, awe. News outlets calling it the most unbelievable pet story in America. People asked who she was. Some wanted to help. Some wanted her arrested. And just like that, the secret life Cassie had built, one soft paw step at a time, was unraveling. Almost caught. You can keep a secret in the dark, but secrets don't stay small when the world starts knocking. 3 days after the video went viral, Cassie's doorbell rang. She froze. Aspen, curled on the rug near the window, lifted his head. His ears pricked. Cassie's breath hitched as she peeked out through the edge of the curtain. A white SUV sat in the gravel driveway. Unmarked. Government plates. Animal control. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She'd hoped the firestorm online would fade, that the anonymous post would get buried under a flood of internet ephemera. But it hadn't. It had spread like wildfire. Millions of views, thousands of comments, endless reposts, under hashtags like #WildAtHeart and #BobcatBaby. People were captivated. Some were inspired. Others were furious. The video had been traced slowly but surely, by people with nothing but time and curiosity. A reflection in the window, the style of the cabin walls, even the distinct Blue Ridge mountain range visible in a blurred background. Someone had tagged her. Someone had doxed her. Cassie stepped away from the window, her heart pounding. She had minutes, maybe seconds. She grabbed Aspen, now nearly 30 pounds and wiry with muscle, and coaxed him toward the back hallway. He resisted, not out of fear, but confusion. His claws scrabbled softly on the wooden floor. "In here, buddy," she whispered, opening the crawl space beneath the stairs, the emergency hiding spot she'd prepped weeks ago. It was lined with blankets, water, a raw meat stash, and his favorite toy, a frayed strip of flannel she wore the first day they met. He slipped in without protest. She shut the panel behind him. Then she walked to the door, slowly, calmly. The knock came again, louder this time. She opened it. 2 officers stood on the porch. One male, late 50s, heavy-set with a clipboard. The other younger, tall, and clearly less sure of himself. "Miss Monroe?" the older one asked. "Yes?" "We received a report that you may be harboring a wild animal," he said flatly. "Specifically, a bobcat." Cassie swallowed. "That's ridiculous," she said with a practiced scoff. "I've seen the video. I saw the post, but that's not me. Someone used my old footage from volunteering at a sanctuary last summer." The younger officer shifted awkwardly. Would you mind if we took a quick look around? Just routine. Cassie paused, her smile forced. Do you have a warrant? They glanced at one another. The older one cleared his throat. Number, but if there's nothing to hide. I respect the law, she said, stepping outside and gently pulling the door behind her. But unless you have a warrant, I can't let you in. I'm sure you understand. The air between them hung tight. The officers exchanged polite but pointed words, reminding her of state laws and potential penalties. She nodded, thanked them, promised to follow up if she saw anything suspicious. They left, but not before glancing around the property. She watched their taillights disappear down the dirt road, then bolted back inside. Aspen was safe, for now. But she wasn't. The rest of the week unraveled in whispers and close calls. The neighbor's daughter, walking her dog, caught a glimpse of Aspen through the window and told her parents. A drone flew overhead one morning, hovering too long above the garage. An email from her school advisor arrived asking if she needed to talk about something urgent. Every second felt like borrowed time. Cassie started locking every door and window. She covered all cameras in the house. Aspen's time outdoors was over. His growing frustration showed. He paced more, clawed at the walls, growled when she left the room. She hated what he was becoming, not because of him, but because of her. He was a wild creature being asked to stay tame, and she was a girl who'd once just wanted to save a life, now trapped in the consequences of doing so. One night, she sat beside the crawlspace, Aspen curled near her feet, eyes closed. I don't know what happens next, she whispered. He let out a soft grunt and nudged her knee. And in that small, broken moment, she felt something shift. It wasn't a matter of if they'd come back. It was when. And this time, they wouldn't come without a warrant. Viral by accident. It wasn't the claws that made people gasp. It was the way he looked at her, like she was home. Cassie hadn't meant for it to happen. The video she had posted anonymously was one of many. Just a clip meant to quietly share something beautiful. In it, Aspen lay, curled across her lap, his spotted coat rising and falling with each breath. The fire crackled in the background, and her fingers moved gently through his fur. At one point, Aspen tilted his head and pressed his nose into the crook of her elbow with a soft chirp that almost sounded like a purr. She had added soft music and a short caption. Not all love is tame. She thought it would vanish into the void, maybe gather a few likes on an obscure wildlife forum. Instead, someone downloaded it. Then it hit Twitter, then Reddit, then TikTok. By the end of the day, it had over 3 million views. By the end of the week, 26 million. It was everywhere. People didn't know who she was at first, but the comments were relentless. Wait, is that a real bobcat? How is she not dead? This is so illegal, but I'm obsessed. I've never seen an animal look at a human like that. The video got stitched, duetted, turned into reaction content by influencers who didn't care if it was fake or not. Cassie watched helplessly as Aspen became an internet myth. The wild cat with a soft heart. The mountain lion roommate. The real-life wild pet Disney story. She never said a word. Didn't post another video, didn't respond to emails, didn't answer her phone. She prayed it would die down. But then the real questions started. Wildlife experts were tagged. Conservationists weighed in. A few noticed clues. The visible fireplace stonework, the style of paneling, a faint reflection in the window that showed her face. It only took a few days before someone linked the video to her old vet school blog, long abandoned but still indexed online. Her name, her school, her town. Everything surfaced. And then came the calls. Reporters, animal control, wildlife advocacy groups, hateful comments, supportive strangers, offers to sponsor her, offers to arrest her. One person claimed she should be nominated for Pet Parent of the Year. Another said she should be banned from working in veterinary care ever again. Cassie stopped going outside. She disconnected her landline. Her inbox ballooned past 500 unread messages. But through it all, Aspen remained unchanged, pacing the garage, hunting moths, curling beside her like always. He didn't know what viral meant. He didn't know he was famous. He just knew that when Cassie's hands trembled, she still reached for him. And when the world outside thundered with judgment, he still came to her side. But the world wasn't just watching anymore. It was moving toward her, fast. And the next knock wouldn't be a warning. It would be a reckoning, the last stand. She saved his life. Now she had to decide if she was brave enough to let it go. They came back 2 days later. This time, they didn't ask for permission. They had a warrant. Cassie stood on the front porch as the animal control officers approached, with calm but final expressions. A state wildlife agent trailed behind them, clipboard in hand, and a tranquilizer rifle slung over his shoulder like a threat unspoken. Aspen was already in the garage enclosure, curled beneath the old wool blanket, his golden eyes watching her with quiet alertness. Cassie had spent the entire night sitting beside him, knowing this moment was coming. "Miss Monroe," one officer said, not unkindly, "you've violated multiple wildlife statutes. We need to take the animal into state custody." Cassie didn't move. Her throat burned with everything she wanted to say. About love, about instinct, about how Aspen had never once harmed her, despite being powerful enough to do so. About how he was more than a case file or a code violation. But the words that came out were soft, choked, and painfully real. "He's not just an animal," she whispered. "He's my heart." The agent looked at her, and for a flicker of a second, something passed in his eyes. Something like understanding. But it didn't change the outcome. She opened the garage herself, kneeling beside Aspen. He didn't run. He didn't growl. He simply pressed his head into her palm. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're going to be okay." They sedated him gently, carried him out wrapped in a thick blanket. Cassie followed them to the truck, her boots crunching on the gravel like thunder in her ears. No cameras, no reporters, just silence. As they closed the doors and drove away, she stood motionless in the driveway. Her arms were empty. The cabin was quiet, and for the first time since that rainy October afternoon in the woods, Cassie Monroe was truly alone. But as the taillights disappeared over the hill, she felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. Not for herself, but for him. He was free, and no matter what the world believed, she would never regret loving him. Separation and silence. When the house became quiet, she realized it had never been about taming him. It had been about saving herself. The cabin felt hollow without Aspen. Cassie had never noticed how loud the silence could be, how it echoed off the pinewood walls, how it sat in her chest like a stone. Every creak in the floorboards reminded her of padded paws. Every gust of wind that rattled the windows made her turn, expecting to see amber eyes staring back. But the crate in the garage was empty now. So were the food bins, and her lap. For the first few days, she did nothing. No school, no email, no calls. Just drifted from room to room like a ghost in her own life. Her grandmother finally showed up on the 5th day, unannounced. She didn't say a word when she walked through the door, just pulled Cassie into a hug and let her cry. They sat by the fire that night, just like Cassie used to with Aspen. She didn't explain everything. She didn't have to. Her grandmother had seen the news, the video, the storm of headlines that had flared and faded in the digital world. All she said was, "You gave that little thing a chance. Doesn't matter what people say. You gave him something most never get, real love." That night, Cassie opened her laptop and pulled up her private footage. She watched Aspen as a kitten, his oversized paws tripping on a blanket. She watched him climb, for the first time fall, and try again. She watched herself, smiling, laughing, whole. It hurt, but it also helped. The next week, she called her advisor, told her everything, expected judgment. What she got was understanding. "You made a mistake," the woman said gently. "But you also made a difference. Don't quit the work. Turn it into purpose." So Cassie started volunteering at the North Carolina Wildlife Sanctuary, quietly, behind the scenes, feeding injured foxes, cleaning pens, prepping medication for raccoons and owls. No cameras, no viral clips, just real work. And it helped. It didn't replace Aspen, but it reminded her that there were others like him, wild things with soft hearts, caught in hard worlds. And maybe, just maybe, she could help one more. Every night she lit the fireplace and sat with a blanket over her lap. And even though he wasn't there, sometimes, just sometimes, she swore she could feel the weight of him again, just for a moment. That's how grief works. And how love never really leaves. A bittersweet reunion. She let him go so he could be free. What she didn't know was he never forgot her. A year passed. The video was still online, still circling every few months like a comet, reigniting conversations and controversies. But for Cassie, the world had grown quiet again, quieter, but not empty. She'd moved forward, step by uncertain step. Her days at the wildlife sanctuary had become more than just routine. They were healing. There was something about the rhythm of animal care, the silent trust between handler and creature, that brought her peace. And then came the email. Subject line, "We think you should come visit." It was from a sanctuary in Tennessee, 2 hours west, where Aspen had been relocated after his seizure. Cassie had asked for updates early on, but eventually the communication stopped. Part of her assumed it was for the best. Maybe they wanted to cut her out, to erase her part in the story. Maybe he had been released. But the message was warm, inviting, hopeful. "He's not releasable, too bonded. But he's healthy. And we think you should see what that means." Her hands trembled as she packed a bag. When she arrived at the sanctuary, nestled in the rolling woods outside Knoxville, the air smelled like pine and damp soil. She was greeted by a quiet staff member who simply smiled and nodded. "He's waiting." Cassie followed a gravel path through rows of enclosures. Owls blinked from shaded perches. A red fox darted through tall grass. She felt her breath catch as she approached a large tree-lined pen with high fencing and a sheltered den built from natural logs and stone. Then she saw him. Aspen, larger now, easily 40 pounds, muscular, his coat thick and brilliant under the afternoon sun. But his eyes, those amber eyes, hadn't changed. He was lounging on a platform near the edge of the fence, legs stretched lazily over the side. When he spotted her, his head lifted. His ears twitched. His body froze. Then he jumped down and trotted to the fence. Cassie moved slowly, her heart pounding. She crouched just outside the barrier, placing her hand flat against the mesh. Aspen pressed his nose to the same spot. No growl, no snarl. Just recognition, and something more. He leaned his weight into the fence, rubbing his face along the mesh the way he used to nudge her arm when he wanted affection. Cassie blinked hard. The tears came, uninvited, but unstoppable. "Hey, wild boy," she whispered. "I missed you." They stayed like that for 10 minutes. No drama, no noise, just the quiet miracle of being remembered. And when she finally stood to go, Aspen sat back on his haunches and watched her walk away, his gaze never breaking. Cassie didn't look back because she didn't have to. He remembered. He was safe, and for the first time in a long time, so was she. You don't always get to keep what you save, but if you love it right, it never really leaves you. Cassie never planned to go viral. She never meant to break the rules or her own heart. But when she found Aspen, shivering, orphaned, wild, she didn't see a threat. She saw a life worth fighting for. And Aspen, he didn't see a human. He saw home. Their story wasn't perfect. It wasn't legal, but it was real. And sometimes that's enough. Because in a world too quick to judge, one girl and one bobcat proved that love, raw, fearless, and unfiltered, can still change everything, even if you have to let it go in the end. Not every connection in life makes sense on paper. Sometimes, the most meaningful bonds are the ones that defy logic, rules, and expectations. Cassie didn't set out to raise a wild animal. She followed compassion, knowing full well it might cost her everything. But through Aspen, she discovered that love isn't about possession. It's about responsibility, sacrifice, and doing what's right even when it breaks your heart. In your own life, you may come across something or someone that needs you. It might not be easy. It might not even make sense. But ask yourself, will you walk away or will you show up with your whole heart? Here at Paw Prints and Stories, we believe in sharing real moments of connection between humans and animals, between instinct and care. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you see the world a little differently, then you belong with us. Subscribe, not just for content, but for compassion, courage, and the stories that prove wild love still exists. Your challenge? The next time you see something fragile, something misunderstood, don't turn away. Be the one who chooses love, no matter how wild it looks.